Well, thanks everyone for joining. I think we'll go ahead and get started. I heard from a few folks who won't be able to join, but send their love and well wishes for a Merry Christmas. So before we go ahead and get started with whoever's here now, I will ask Jessica to open us up in prayer.
Great. If you could please bow your heads with me. Father God, we just come before you with hearts of thanksgiving and gratitude. We thank you for this Advent season as we dwell on the most incredible gift you've ever given us, which is you yourself coming down, God with us as Jesus, Lord. And we just thank you for this time to be together to seek your insight, your wisdom, your guidance for us. And we just ask that during our time together, that you will just, the Holy Spirit will speak to us, that we will be inspired, and you will give us guidance for how we can partner with you in seeing your kingdom come. I also pray special protection during this season over our friends, our family members, and people just all throughout our communities, just for health and safety. And just thank you for the great gift of your son, Jesus Christ. Amen.
Amen. Thank you, Jessica. So I will turn it over now to my colleague and friend Marcus, who will chat about some things coming up.
Yeah, so as we kind of get ready to roll off this year, 2020, and what a year it's been, and this kind of end of this book club, we don't want you to lose touch with us. We want to stay in touch with you. We want to keep this community strong and growing. And we also, because you've been with us for so long here, we want to invite you into something new and exciting. So I'm going to share screen really quickly. Hopefully you can see that. This idea that there is a new experience from EEN that is coming in January. We're calling it Summit 21, and that theme is regeneration. And so you are the first, literally the first people outside of EEN to hear this come from my voice. I'm very excited about this. In January, we're going to be inviting you into an experience. It'll be virtual because of coronavirus. We have some great stuff we're putting together from you. There are going to be some people you're going to be hearing from. And the idea is we want to call our community of advocates and creation care stewards and champions together for an experience into a community from the top of the mountain, so that we can really see what God has in store for us in 21 and into the future. And then we'll have some worship together. We'll be together. We'll have some community. And then we'll all come back down the mountain. We'll go back to our different homes and states and communities with their regenerated energy and a regenerated vision for what it is that God is calling us into in the kingdom. So you hear it first. You'll get more information after the holiday, but we just wanted to wet your whistle a little bit and let you know. And if you have any questions, I'm happy to take those. I think we have a couple of minutes before Tori has to get going, but we just really, when we prayed about it, we asked ourselves, who do we want there on the mountaintop with us? And who needs to hear about it first? And the book club was obviously one of the very first places we could think to go. And so as you're getting ready to wind down and move into your holiday season, we just want you to know that when you get back in the new year, we're ready for you. We're waiting.
Thanks, Marcus. So excited for what's coming up. So before we get into our discussion today, just a few announcements to make. Speaking of things coming up, I'll be sending a survey right after this just about your book club experience so far and some hopes you have for the future. And that is designed to be anonymous. So please do let us know your full, honest thoughts. We won't know who said them, and it'll really help us continue to craft great online experiences in 2021. So I'll be sending that out along with that fun teaser graphic for Summit 21. And I also just want to ask everyone to please review the book. Per Lindsay's request, she reached out to me and wanted me to make that announcement. It's really important to her as an author, as a member of EEN's network, to have our reviews. So wherever you bought it, Amazon, she mentioned Goodreads, if you're a Goodreads person. So just go ahead and give that a review, assign it some stars. That would really mean a lot to Lindsay and help her with the book. So now I want to share my screen and get into our presentation for the day. All right. Everyone should be able to see it. Awesome. I see some nods and some thumbs up. So this week is going to be a little different than what we've done in the past. We wanted to turn our attention from the book and start talking about some ways to take action. I really like how we try to end book club with activation, things you can do. And I thought talking about storytelling in our creation care testimony campaign would be a great way to do that. Something I love about this book is how it uses the power of stories to illustrate points. And I don't want to say the science isn't important, but we also know that's not necessarily what's going to change hearts and minds. It's telling stories and using that as a way to illustrate creation care and the ways that we can come together and care for creation. And I think Lindsay's book does that really well. And so today I wanted to talk about ways that we can implement storytelling in our own lives to talk about creation care and encourage our communities to come along and take action. So what we're going to do today is I'll be going over some storytelling and messaging tips, talking about our campaign. We'll be sharing some samples of what this storytelling looks like, sharing your creation care testimony. We're also going to build in some time for journaling and reflection. It's book club, but we're going to spend some time writing today, and then we'll go to our breakout rooms and share with others. So before we get started, I would love to share this video from EEN's board member, Paul Douglas in Minnesota. And I realize now I want to make sure that I have sound on. Share computer sound. There we go.
Paul Douglas here. Counting the screens, it's never enough screens. Look, I'm on the board of EEN, Evangelical Environmental Network. I'm a meteorologist from Penn State. I'm a serial entrepreneur. I'm on my 7th weather tech business. And I'm also a dad and a new grandfather. I have an 8-month-old grandson, Jordan, who is the love of my life. Talk about the ultimate blessing. We've all been blessed, and with great blessings come great responsibilities. As a Christian, I take Genesis seriously. God made us in his self-image. Says so in the Bible. He gave us big, beautiful brains, the ability to think clearly and logically and improve our lives, and the good sense not to foul our nest. And that's exactly what we're doing right now. We honor the Creator when we protect his creation and defend his children. We are called to be stewards. Luke 16:2. Be a good steward in everything that you do. And yes, something my dad taught me growing up, actions have consequences. You know, we've had a great ride the past couple of centuries, but it's come at the expense of the atmosphere specifically. Carbon pollution now spiking at levels we've never seen before. My eyes are wide open. It was the weather, the crazy weather, that got me to realize 20 years ago that something was up. I connected the dots, came to the realization that the climate scientists probably right. And I have to say, there's nothing inherently liberal about acknowledging reality. And that's exactly what we're doing right now, acknowledging reality. Whether it comes to the virus, whether it comes to racial injustice, or yes, a rapidly changing climate. At the end of the day, though, I'm optimistic for 2 reasons. Young people aren't as cynical or skeptical, in many cases, as their parents or grandparents. And the drop in price for renewables, at some point, solar, wind, biofuels, becomes a no-brainer. It's cheaper. People may do the right thing because it's going to save them money. So I'm optimistic long-term. In the short term, there will be more bumps. The situation isn't hopeless. We aren't helpless. Be a part of EEN. We need you.
I really love this example because here we have Paul talking about creation care in a way only Paul can. As a meteorologist, as a member of his family, he's sharing why he cares about this as a resident of Minnesota, as a person of faith. And my hope today is that we'll all learn how to best craft stories and talk about creation care in a unique way that only we can. And I think this is really, really important. The most recent Yale Program on Climate Change Communication report really highlights this. A record 73% of Americans think that global warming is happening, but only 6 in 10 say they rarely or never discuss it with their friends and family. And 36% discuss it occasionally or often. So we're seeing that more and more Americans are coming on board with the reality of the climate crisis, but they're not having those conversations with their friends and family. And that's really discouraging because fewer than half of Americans think their friends and family expect them to take action on global warming. And this is super important because these findings from Yale say that the strongest predictors of climate policy support, particularly among conservatives, is that their friends and family think it's important. So this means that climate change is widely understood, but not enough people are talking about it. And that makes you the perfect messenger to have these conversations in your community. We do know these conversations can be challenging sometimes, and that's because talking about climate change is related to our deepest sense of self, our religious views. If you grew up in a tradition like I did, climate change wasn't talked about, and the idea of accepting climate science was potentially seen as something that could go against our faith. It's also political. EEN is a nonpartisan organization, but there's often the assumption that you have to be a liberal Democrat to care about climate change. One thing I really liked in Paul's video is he said, this is not a liberal issue. It's something we can all care about. Climate change is also related to our community and how we interact with each other. And the conversations also get down to the economy. And Paul talked about how the price of renewable energy is going down, and that's a huge reason to have hope. But because climate change is related to all these deep things, it can be challenging to have a conversation. Because at the core, climate acceptance or skepticism can be an identity marker. And so what's really important about storytelling and crafting creation care testimonies is showing that people can care about climate change regardless of their identity. Yes, you can be a Christian and care about climate change. You can be a conservative, a parent, a person in your community. Affirming who they are and showing them that they have reasons to care about climate change is really important. And so just some basics as we dive into storytelling. Be confident. You are the expert because you're telling your own story and you're speaking to your own community. You can do that in a way that I can't, that other people at EEN can't, which is why we want to empower you because you are the right person to talk to your community. It's also important to know your audience. If you do want to talk to a really liberal Democratic crowd about climate change, maybe that's going to be a little different. And it's also important to know if you're speaking to fellow people of faith. That's really going to help you be effective in your messaging. And it's always important to communicate values and identities over facts and statistics, especially because people are motivated by shared values and belongings. I'm a parent and I care about climate change because I want my kids to have a healthy, safe future. I'm a Christian and I care about climate change because I want to love my neighbor. We're bonding over shared values and helping persuade people to understand how climate change impacts them. Some ways to implement this in conversation is using what's called the power of I. Telling your own personal story instead of those facts and statistics, as we've learned, is more persuasive. So first, you want to establish how you're a trusted messenger. Paul opened up his video saying, I'm a board member of EEN, I'm a parent, I'm a Christian, I'm a meteorologist. Sharing who he is and highlighting how he's a trusted messenger in his community. And that turns into peer trust. I have things in common with you. I would share about how I grew up in the church, how I still go to church. Building a worldview. I'm not a typical environmentalist. I'm not out hugging trees or wearing Birkenstocks necessarily, but I care about this because I'm a Christian. That's going to look different for everyone, but establishing a worldview is a great way to share your own story. Starting with belief formation. I believe that climate change is happening. Highlight what you're talking about. Give some experiential evidence, not facts and statistics, but because you see that the growing season in your community is way longer. You see that droughts or flood are impacting farmers in your community. Tell stories of what's happening around you, not just share the facts and statistics about the sea level rise, those data points. And that's because you can make it here and now. Say how you've seen big changes, make it relate. Instead of talking about the devastation that will happen if we don't reduce greenhouse gas emissions far off in the future, there are things happening here and now, and that will really help connect with people and show them how climate change is a present reality, not just a distant threat. And share some emotion. We are humans. Emotions are natural, God-given. So share, say, I am concerned about what's happening. I'm worried for my children's future. I'm really passionate and fired up about this. It's okay to bring emotion in, especially as you're telling your story. And then get into some motivation. Why do you have to do something? Because your faith calls you to care about this, because farmers in your community are struggling. And then build that social norm. Paul talked about ways he's getting involved, things that give him hope. Share whatever you're doing in your community. Maybe you have gotten involved with a church group on creation care. You can share about joining EEN to learn more. Making it seem normal and cool and just normal that you're getting involved with creation care and trying to learn things. Also, creating realistic trust building. Like Paul said, there's going to be some bumps in the road here and now. We don't have to be naive. We don't have to hide the reality of that it's not easy to make changes sometimes. And so building that realistic trust building will really help bring people into the movement. And then sharing rewards. Paul talked about the healthy future. You can talk about how it feels to be a part of a community at EEN, how excited you are to build a healthy future for your children. So not just highlighting the realities of the climate crisis, but also showing the potential, the opportunity of taking action. So we've talked all about the importance of this, some best ways to engage in storytelling. Now what? We have a new campaign to collect and share your stories, where you can upload a video like we saw from Paul. And this is really important because, as we've learned, stories have the power to change hearts and minds and illustrate points in unique ways, just like we learned with the parables Lindsay pulled together in the book. This is also a really fantastic and rather easy way to share with your social media circles in particular about why you're passionate about creation care without even having to pick up the phone and talk to people. It's a really natural conversation starter, and you'll reach new people. Most importantly, I think it helps normalize creation care and climate action as something Christians are vocal about. I think this is good for two reasons. It shows fellow Christians that they can engage with creation care as part of their faith. And I also think it's a good witness for those outside of the church to see that Christians are living out their faith in really impactful ways. And it also will hopefully help other Christians discover that they also care about creation care because they have kids with asthma and health issues related to air pollution. They live in farming communities and they're concerned about food insecurity and supporting clean jobs. Telling these stories and sharing the ways you're seeing climate change in your community will really help other people come along. So now I will share another example of videos we're collecting as part of this campaign, and it is my own. So here we go. Hi, I'm Tori, and I'm the Communications Director here at EEN. Today I want to talk to you a little bit about my creation care journey so far. Growing up, we did things like recycling in the house, and we spent a lot of time out exploring God's creation. I remember family trips to national parks like the Grand Canyon, and days spent hiking and exploring the lush and beautiful landscape of New England. Though we did little things like recycling and spent time to really appreciate nature, I wasn't really sure how these things connected to my faith. These activities were separate from visits to church, and they were never really talked about. Then, when I went to college, a small Christian school up in Massachusetts, I began to learn about the climate crisis, the ways that communities would be impacted in the future, as well as the ways people were already suffering today because of ecological disaster. I learned about the ways that food supply would be impacted, I learned about the way land erosion and sea level rise would impact communities. And to me, it just made sense that Christians would care about this issue. I grew up hearing all about how we had to love our neighbors, especially the most vulnerable, to do things like care for the poor, to live out our faith in tangible ways. And yet caring for the environment was never really talked about. And to me, it just made sense that Christians should be at the forefront of these issues. Throughout my time in college, I wasn't really sure how to connect what I was studying, my faith, and this newfound awareness of climate change and issues that related to God's creation. I wasn't sure how these things were connected or ways that Christians should be involved. And that's why I'm so excited now to be working for EEN, where we can help connect these dots for Christians and to raise awareness and let them know that caring for God's creation is part of our faith. And so my hope for the church and our nation moving forward is that things like caring for God's creation won't be seen as political or divisive, but rather a way to love our neighbors and love God better. So that's another example of what compiling your story could look like. And that's a story that I was able to tell uniquely because I am the one here who went to that small Christian college, who grew up in a church that wasn't talking about creation care. And I tried some storytelling elements in there. I tried to use, imagery, talking about God's creation, and ending with a positive note and hopefully inviting people into the movement. And so now these are some questions you can use to help prompt your own story. And so I'm going to leave these slides up, and we do have time to spend about 8 minutes journaling. I'll leave the slides up. I do think I have to adjust breakout rooms, so I might stop sharing about 5 minutes in, but I'll be sure to put those questions in the chat. And we'll have a little time for questions before we go to breakout rooms. And if I can't see the chat with my screen share on. So if people have been responding in chat, I will be sure to get to that while we spend some time journaling. So just take time. It doesn't have to be a perfect, well-crafted answer within 8 minutes, of course, but this is rather to start thinking through the ways you could begin to tell your story. And I hope this will be really helpful when folks ask you, hey, why are you a part of EEN? Why did you join this book club? And you can start pulling out these thoughts as a little bit of an elevator pitch almost to start talking about creation care. So I will leave you journaling, and I'm just going to check the chat, and we will be back in 8 minutes. I'll keep time. All right. Thank you, everyone, for engaging with that journaling. And of course, I expect that this will only be the beginning. So no worries if you couldn't get to every question or you still have more thoughts swirling around. We just want this to be the beginning. And so I'll open up for questions in a minute, but I just wanted to talk about that campaign that I've been talking about, sharing your climate testimony. That's where my video was posted, where Paul's video was posted, as well as some others that you can go check out. And I know this is new and potentially awkward for folks. I'll freely admit it was awkward for me to get on camera and film myself and then to watch it with all of you. But as we learned today, this is exactly what is extremely impactful in our own communities. So though it might be new and challenging, it's also super important. And so when you have finished journaling, we'll have a chance to workshop our stories here together in a minute. But when you're done, and I'll send this in our follow-up email today, we have our website, tribute.co/EEN, and you can do it on your phone or your computer. And you can film right on the site, or you can film on your phone and upload it later. You'll have both those options that I circled here. So you can record it right there, upload it, and definitely feel free to check out the site and watch some other videos, get ideas. No one story looks like the other. And I think that's part of what makes this campaign so exciting. So we have about 3 minutes before breakout rooms. I've set it up so each person will have time to share and receive feedback. So your groups might look a little different, and some groups have multiple EEN staff there. And I see David already put his in the chat. That's awesome. If you typed it and want to share it that way, that's also really cool. And we will have chance in breakout room. So now I will stop talking and see if anyone has any questions.
Yeah, Tori, I have a question. Are we going to follow up with the book club?
That's a great question. You mean like have another book club?
Well, I mean, like have another book club, yeah.
Maybe I see Marcus is off video, but the short answer is yes. We are also re-envisioning what that online community will look like. There he is. Marcus, do you have anything you want to share on that?
Yeah, sorry, I didn't want to be diverted looking at another screen. This community is going to continue to go and grow. And so that survey that Tori's sending out after will help us. Some of the questions are like, what are books you suggest we read? What are some of the values you got out of this community? And there's one more, I think, question that there's a bunch of questions, but those will help us over the holiday season figure out which direction to grow the community and to bring in more people. And so the heart is that continue for this community to continue to meet and grow with books and possibly even speaker series. So, that's one of the things that people get a lot of value of is when the author comes and speaks to us. And so we are going to continue the book club. We may also sprinkle in a couple of other things, and we're going to make it an event type style, not an event in the sense that it has to be anything big production wise, but that we really want to make that time sacred and special when we do meet together. And so we won't ask you to meet every single week all year in 2021. We'll define those times, those pockets of times when we're going to do it. And we're going to really provide you guys some high quality content.
So definitely fill out that survey to help be a part of crafting what that's going to look like in 2021. We definitely will not be doing anything before Christmas. So I encourage folks to enjoy time, hopefully off Zoom.
Tori, I have a question.
Yeah.
One thing you mentioned this time that jumped out at me was talking about experiential evidence, which I strongly agree with, but rather than really emphasizing data. And I'm sort of, all of a sudden it sort of bothered me a little bit that we're underplaying data. And maybe that's because of the 2 to 3 minute time frame. We just don't have a lot of time, but I feel like a lot of issues that we've been blundering about in the last few months in our country have been data related. So why would you suggest not really bringing it up right now?
Yeah, that's true. And I don't want to underplay the importance of science. Science is how we know we have a climate crisis and how we know how we're supposed to respond. And of course, we have Dr. Jessica Mormon, who is a climate scientist on the call. So EEN really values science and data. For the purposes of sharing your creation care testimony, and a lot of this was built in also social studies on having conversations with people. So it's not that the science isn't important, but when you're talking to people, particularly skeptical people, leading with science is not going to be the most effective. Leading with things like experiential evidence. So then when they say, oh, this farm in my community is really flooding a lot, what's happening there? Then you can come in with more of the science, but really leading with the stories and not the facts is a way to open hearts and minds. And you're right, we're seeing a lot of science denial and skepticism in the country right now with the vaccine, with COVID, with masks, and it's really discouraging. And I've been using a lot of these examples, like leading with experiential evidence instead of the facts and science in skeptical communities, to say, oh, well, this is how people I know with asthma are suffering from COVID right now, and telling those stories before getting into the facts and science. So definitely not downplaying it, but rather starting off with the stories and then hopefully leading into those conversations later.
You know, one of the ways you could do this, incorporate data and also emotion with it. I'm a pastor, and a lot of times, you talk about data and people go to sleep in the pews. But if you say like, this is equivalent to like 3 school buses a day crashing, you use use an analogy, and sometimes that grabs heartstrings.
Yeah, and just as a scientist, I just want to affirm everything that Tori just said, as well as Chris, of whenever you engage the heart first and begin to make it accessible and help whoever you're talking with make that connection of how climate change, pollution, whatever it is, how that impacts their own lives, their community, the people and things they already care about, then they're open to receive some of that data that you can then bring to back it up with strength. But opening the heart then leads for opening up to the mind as well. And again, that's backed up by a lot of really robust social science too. So just to affirm what Tori said, lead with the stories, but it's always backed up with data. We're not just relying on emotion, opinion, but it's really, these things are backed up by hard science.
Yeah, stories actually help with the fundraising too.
Mm-hmm.
That's true. It's fundraising season for EEN, so I've been trying to compile the stories of what we've been up to and the highlights of that. So keep an eye out for emails from us on that note as well. So I would love to turn to breakout rooms so folks have time. I know there's a few more questions, but I'm not going anywhere. Email me if you want to set up a phone call. Let's keep chatting about these important issues. So I'm going to open up breakout rooms. There is 4 book club participants. Some groups have multiple staff. Staff is not going to share their stories, but if you end up with extra time today, then please do pick on them and encourage them to tell you a little bit more about themselves if they haven't in book club yet. So I'm putting in the chat box some guides. I would say around 3 minutes. We're running a little late. Spend around 3 minutes sharing your story, and then at minimum 2 or at most 2 minutes with feedback. Things to encourage our brothers and sisters here about what they said, and if you have any things to point out that could make their story even stronger. Again, we don't expect the journaling to be complete, so just dive in with whatever you have, whatever it looks like now, and start practicing sharing your story in this space with people we've already built community with. So now I'm opening up those breakout rooms, and I hope everyone has a merry and blessed Christmas. And like I said, feel free to call, text, or email me to keep chatting about these things.